We'll just give everybody about a minute more to get in and attend. Well, hello, my name is Renee Sullivan. I'm a Sales and Marketing Coordinator for BTB Security. And as you already know, this is the Security Awareness Training webinar. Today, it'll be Ron Schlecht, Managing Partner for BTB Security, who will be giving the presentation. Ron is a certified information security professional and a security computer examiner with 17 plus years of experience in the security risk space, as well as digital forensics and over 18 years of total experience in information technology. Ron is the co-founder for BTB Security, and we've just had our 10-year anniversary, so we've been around for a little while. He comes to us after successfully developing and leading professional service teams in internal security departments. So if Ron is ready, we can start the webinar.
Hey, I'm ready. I noticed how you paused when you said professional, though, so
no.
I'll take that
Sorry
as a small slight.
No.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Ron. I'm going to start the presentation. We tried to make it as focused as possible on security awareness training, and anybody in this field or IT in general does realize that we could probably go on for a couple hours when we're talking about security awareness and some of the topics that we'll get into here today. So just to get started, run through the presentation. I'm sure some of you have already seen this. Just a brief background on the company. Again, like Renee said, we've been around since 2006, headquartered and started here in Philadelphia, which is where I'm at. And then we also have offices in Chicago and Austin. We've been able to cover the nation, continued with our growth, and really adding those offices has just made the response times for our incident responders when we're doing breach response a lot better for our clients. Background, again, something that everybody can look at on the website, which is down at the bottom of the screen there, but we have people that have come to us from other consulting organizations, and then also, which is important to us, experience in building, managing, and operating corporate security groups. So essentially sitting on both sides of the table, not just kind of doing the consulting for all of our careers. 3 partners, just very high level again. This is Ron speaking. Chris McGinley is also in Philadelphia, and then Brian Bailey is actually out in Chicago. So that's the high level. Again, you can gain more information at btbsecurity.com or contact us after the webinar. The agenda, kind of keeping it high level, and hopefully we'll get some good information out of this. It's something that will be recorded and played on our website, so this is something that people can use for some of their own security awareness training. Browsing security and internet accounts. We're going to talk about a little bit about email and IM security. Of course, everyone's favorite topic, passwords, Wi-Fi, viruses and malware, and then also social engineering. And just to give you a heads up, the viruses and malware and social engineering will actually come before the Wi-Fi section. So there is a little bit of an ordering change that I just pulled off before I uploaded the presentation. So let's jump right into it. There's a lot of topics and trying to be as thorough as we can. We talk and start with web browsing security. We talk about why it can be risky. Web browsers like Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, and even Safari bring all the content to our computers, but much of the content's interactive, allowing us to have that enjoyable and customized experience. But this does require a couple certain things. Creating the customized and dynamic environment requires the complex software has access to your computer and that there's interaction from you. Of course, and one of the reasons why we're talking about it today is that all of these things can introduce risk to you and your computer. So how do you protect yourself? At the very high level, it's pretty easy. Keep all of your software up to date, meaning your web browser, any add-ons that you have specifically with your browser, and then any helper software, things like Java, Flash, PDF readers. If you've noticed in the news, there's been a lot of vulnerabilities more recently about Flash and Java. And this is stuff that has continued to happen. This is stuff that, it's not new to anyone, but it's just important to point out that these are those helper pieces of software where they're not directly related to your actual browser, but there are other parts where they might plug into not only the browser but other pieces of software on your computer. So if you're unsure about pop-ups, click no or cancel, one of the high-level tenets as well. And then the last big tip, look for HTTPS in the URL and the security lock when visiting secure sites or accessing sensitive information. Again, these are high-level tips. We'll get into a little bit more. If anybody's had a penetration test done, you know there are ways around these things that we usually like to exploit when we're doing those tests, especially social engineering, but these are some very basic precautions that everyone can follow. How do you spot the bad stuff? It's pretty easy, actually. Hover over the links to see the destination URL in the status bar. Does it match? Is it what you expect? And this is where a lot of our social engineering attacks actually take advantage of people quickly doing this or not doing it at all. So you can hide links. Sometimes we make them so that they're very close. People don't pick them up, and they end up clicking on those links. Beware of links to fantastic stories and eye-catching pictures. There's an example title there. You'll never believe what he or she did. Of course, you know, everybody, it's like standing in line at the grocery store. Your eyes are going to go to those wild headlines from the Inquirer. While you might not pick it up, or some of you may, you still kind of have an interest, and a lot of people end up clicking to that just because they have that interest. And then also watch out for links that reference other unknown URLs in them. So if you're looking, either hovering over a URL, or if you've clicked it, you know, some of the things that are pretty obvious in there will basically redirect to other bad sites. And that's a small example. Obviously, the URLs or the actual web address can be pretty lengthy, and it can be hidden in there pretty well, but it's something to be able to point out and actually look for when you're doing this. Browser-specific precautions. And we're going to talk about, you know, some of the more specific and some of the most popular browsers. They do enable security settings by default now. So we've moved away from the phases of these pieces of software where, you know, they were just trying to gain market share and then also kind of introduce their own either search bars or default websites. We've now moved to a better space in the browser market, where you do have a lot of good options, you know, between them, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, and even Safari. And a lot of those software companies have enabled the security settings by default. Just some high-level examples, preventing pop-ups. They all have the capability to do this in Internet Explorer, Chrome, and Firefox. One of the other big things is to prevent geolocation tracking. I know even myself this morning I was looking at travel for an upcoming conference, and I was surprised that, you know, I didn't have geolocation tracking on, but I still got a pop-up from Chrome to try to enable it. And this is something that obviously for myself I never enable, but I was a little bit surprised that Chrome had actually asked me again. So I'm not sure if that was something on the website specifically that was trying to gain access to my location, or, you know, something else. And then of course enabling privacy settings. So in Chrome you can actually put a do not track request with the browsing traffic, and Firefox does the same thing, where you can actually say that you don't want to be tracked. And a lot of this stuff happens basically for the experience on a website, but at the same time there's a lot of information that most people don't realize that they're giving up when they're surfing, or could be exposed to different websites that actually request that information. Moving along a little bit, you know, kind of how you protect yourself in the quote-unquote cloud. And this really just talks about making sure you understand what you're signing up for when you're agreeing to use different sites. Things like Facebook, Twitter, or cloud storage sites like SkyDrive or Dropbox. A lot of people, and you know, everybody's fallen into this trap at one time or another, has looked at a user agreement or installed an app, and you kind of blindly scroll through the actual policy, whether it's a user agreement or a privacy policy or a security policy. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff hidden in those. with the way that social media has changed, and even some of the service sites like Dropbox have changed over the past couple of years, they seem to be doing pretty regular updates on their security policies or their privacy policies or the end user agreements. So I would urge you, if you do have the time, to read those, but at the same time, just get a high-level understanding and maybe look for key things within that agreement that may affect how your information is used. In addition to that, on the social media sites, limiting the personal details regarding you, your family, and what you're doing. So a good example, and I think this is a little bit less common now, telling everyone that you'll be out on vacation for a week, just because then you're exposing yourself to potential burglaries. This is just like anything. I mean, if you're going to be away for the week, and I know a lot of people have gotten away from this, but a lot of people stop their newspaper delivery or their mail delivery, or they have a neighbor pick up their mail for them, right? So it's not collecting in your mailbox and doesn't tip somebody off that you're going to be gone. The same goes for social media. You don't want to advertise out there that you're going to be gone, no one's going to be at your house, things like that. But in addition to that, think about the personal details that you expose when you're using those sites. Yesterday, we actually did an interview for a local television station, and we showed them, when we were doing reconnaissance, not only on the technical side but on the social side, how we were able to use social media sites like Facebook and also LinkedIn to pull information about folks, not only screen scraping and gaining information about their employment and their title, and kind of where they fit within the organization to be able to craft social engineering or technical attacks. But then also, if we're looking at doing a very targeted attack, looking at the type of information that can be pulled from folks that they put out there on social media. Pet names, sibling names, mother's maiden names, all things that, believe it or not, can be used to set up security questions or can be used in combination for passwords, which we'll be talking about both of those topics a little bit later on in the presentation. So again, making sure that you're not putting too many personal details out there, or there's a lot of good settings specifically within Facebook about not only warning you about those personal details, but then also setting who can see those things. So just making sure you're cognizant of that. And then, of course, using strong different passwords for each site. It'll stop you from losing everything if one password is compromised. Again, we'll talk about passwords a little bit later on, but this is an important topic to make sure that you kind of treat each one individually as an untrusted resource. Again, going through some of the social media sites, avoid taking surveys through social media. Some of them have malicious intent. So when we're doing this type of stuff, we may set up fake social media accounts. Look at the type of people that we can connect with and put surveys out. Again, these surveys can be used to trick people into giving more information about themselves or answering questions that could be security questions to verify the identity of folks. So think about that. If you're a victim of a survey scam, you must go back in and make sure the privacy settings for your account are adjusted properly. So there are a lot of applications that hook to different social media accounts, or even jump drive or Dropbox type accounts. Just make sure that you understand how those different applications hook in and what they're allowed to do with that information or with the level of access that you use. Then, of course, be on the lookout for emails claiming to be from a social networking site, as they can be spoofed. Check any messages directly on the official website. We've seen a slight downturn in this over the past 6 months, but people still fall for it. I get these emails pretty regularly from different or newer social media sites, specifically about business, people wanting to connect, whatever it may be. Since I've never signed up for anything other than some of your typical social media accounts, I always go directly to the site, make sure that I don't have an account, number one, and then also if there's anything in there about unsubscribing and making sure that I don't get any more mail from them, do that as well. But I go directly to that site. Realize that the internet is a public resource. So only post the information that you're comfortable with anyone seeing. Even with appropriate privacy settings, we've seen it in the past where social media sites change their privacy settings that affect the content that's able to be posted or that was posted. Now obviously don't fall for the scam that seems to be once again making its round about Facebook making everything public. That is a hoax. But at the same time, you're putting something out there on the internet that can be used potentially against you. So I've seen this in multiple cases. Usually as an expert witness, where people are asked certain questions, and then something that they said in social media was pulled back to either refute or support some sort of stance in court. So just be careful about that. Be skeptical of strangers. It's easy for people to misrepresent who they are or what their motives are. Again, going back on to how we do penetration testing, we have fake social media accounts. It's not something that we like to brag about, but it's a way that we do a lot of our social reconnaissance. So connecting with people who look like a legitimate user and then using that information to get more information around folks or organizations, it's used specifically for our white hat hacking efforts. Make sure you review and adjust your privacy settings for each social media site you use. This is something that I already touched on, but I would do this regularly. So I've made it part of something that I do on a quarterly check, but then also if I know anything's changed in the user agreement or the privacy agreement on a certain site, I'll make sure that I go back through and understand what these changes mean. And then of course, what I led off with, read and understand the company's policy on social media and ask your manager for guidance if you have any questions. So you can use this stuff on your own time. And the security awareness training that we're doing today is not only about what you need to be doing personally, but then what you need to be doing professionally during your own company's time. Every company may have a different policy on social media use. A lot of people allow it during work time, but I can say that most of the organizations that we work with allow it, but make sure that it's monitored in some capacity. So if you're posting something negative about the company, or if you're posting something that may adversely affect your clients, or that could be misconstrued or taken as very offensive, it's something that could be used against you. A lot of people also check it in terms of time usage. So while a lot of people allow it, I know that a lot of companies also push reports out to managers to show them how much time their employees are actually spending on social media. So if you have somebody that's maybe in a marginal review period, or they're on a performance improvement plan, and next thing you know, you see that their social media use is way up. They spent 4 hours a day, or posted 10 times during a day on social media. This is something that's concerning. Obviously, you're at work to work, not be playing around on social media. Jumping into email and instant messaging, we all know that email is a critical component of business. Instant messaging, if you do have it in your organization or use it personally, it does aid in the convenience of communication. Gone are the days where everybody's in the office all the time. You're able to stand up from your desk or your cubicle or walk out of your office and have a quick conversation. I know at BTB Security, we use it all the time, and it's great for quick communications, just to ask a quick question or just to get clarification on a project or an email. Emails are usually exchanged during the day, most with a business purpose. Unfortunately, emails are also available to those who propose ranges from benign to extremely malicious. Some are simply attempting to reach out to provide unsolicited service. Others are looking to steal identities, credit card information, proprietary information, and money. So looking at, again, how we do social engineering when we're engaged with folks, this is one of the main reasons that when we talk about awareness, email is one of the most important topics, because it's very easy to spoof identities, make it look like it's coming from somebody that you may know, but then also hide certain things in those emails. For most cases, email is used for business purposes. And I don't know about anybody else on the call, and the reason that I started to laugh was reaching out to provide unsolicited services. we do this stuff. Every company that has a service or solution to offer reaches out to individuals that they haven't worked with previously as prospective clients to try to get them to either join a webinar or attend a conference that they're going to be at, or just look at a service that they provide. So both sides of the coin here, and everybody that's on the call has experienced this at one time. Well, it's probably how you figured out about this webinar as well. But at the same time, there are some that are very malicious. People use some pretty tricky tactics to be able to talk to you or get you to do things. So how do you protect yourself? In one case, or in most cases, some of the best ways to do this is to just make sure that you keep your personal email separate from your business emails. I've been doing this for years. Even though I'm a partner in this company, I still do it now. So I make sure that if it's a friend's conversation or something that I'm doing in my personal life, it shuffles off to my other email account. And no, it's not Yahoo. The other thing is to treat unsolicited emails with suspicion. I got an email a couple of days ago that was pretty straightforward. It was a request for a meeting, but then also the person introduced themselves as a good friend of one of the employees at our company and said that, he recommended that we get together. So of course, the first thing that I did was I actually sent him an instant message and said, "Do you know this person? Are you good friends?" And unfortunately, it wasn't true. He knew the person. They weren't super close friends. So he had to have a conversation with that individual to make sure that they worded their introductions and the request to have a meeting a little bit differently. Don't click on attachments unless you're absolutely certain they're from a reputable source. Again, going back to an example for yesterday and some of the things that we do, payloads can be installed and kind of put in pretty much everything, including documents. So as a Word document, if macros are enabled, the hidden content can automatically execute. Now, a lot of people get these things on a regular basis, especially if you're looking at resumes or proposals. But I would warn you to make sure that when you're getting an attachment, if it's not from one of those sources that you'd expect it from, to make sure that you set it aside or have somebody open it that can actually understand what's going to happen when they open that. Take it off the network, send it to your IT department, or send it to your security service provider so that they can actually inspect it and take a look at it. Otherwise, if it's from somebody you don't know, the likelihood of it containing some sort of malicious payload or virus is pretty high. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of these attacks in receipts or tracking information where you have to open a PDF, or proposals and invoices. And we've seen this stuff as well in our business, where people send us invoices where we never engaged with them before. They're just sending you an invoice, number one, to see if they can actually get you to click and open the attachment, but number two, to see if you'll just pay it. And I gotta imagine there are a lot of companies that will put it into their process if they don't have some sort of larger accounting process to actually check and balance the things that get paid, that may actually pay this. Again, when we're talking about emails, we kind of go back to that web browsing security. Hover over any links within the email to see the destination URL in the status bar. Does it match? Is it what you expect? And then one of the age-old tells of bad emails or phishing emails, beware of misspelled words within the text of the email. If it looks like a financial institution is asking you for personal information by asking you to click a link, again, like we had talked about with the social media sites or any of the external service providers, go directly to the site. If it's something that seems out of line for them, especially if they're asking for personal information via email, give them a call. Go directly to that source and try to verify the information. If it's absolutely critical, I doubt in most cases that people are going to be sending you an email to reset passwords or verifying personal information unless you've specifically requested it. So more of the precautions. Unless you're using a secure email product, assume anyone can see anything you send in an email. And this is super important. This is something that I always preach to clients and try to help people understand. Treat email as if it's a postcard. So if it's something that you're not comfortable saying in a postcard that basically anybody that touches it would be able to see, do not put it in an email. And this goes for business confidential information, personally identifiable information, or anything that you would deem inappropriate. Do everything you can to make sure you don't open suspicious emails. If you open it by accident or you auto-open, if that's set in your email client, don't click on any links within that email. Notify your IT department or your security provider. The other thing with IM, don't participate in IM exchanges with anyone you're not familiar with. And if you really have a doubt, pick up the phone to confirm the authenticity of an email or an IM if you're unsure. And again, kind of touched on instant messaging here, but at the same time, another communication platform that's great. It has a business use, but at the same time, there are precautions that everyone needs to undertake. We'll jump into passwords now. It's one of the longer sections. Everybody's probably heard it at one time or another, but it's important to go through. Obviously, passwords are used to identify you, but they are an easy attack or an easy target for an attacker. We do a number of pen tests throughout the year. It's our most popular professional service. And unfortunately, we're still breaking into companies because of bad passwords. You should treat it as one of the most sensitive pieces of information that you have. Treat it similar to that PIN that you have for your ATM card. Why should you care about it? There's a couple different reasons. One's accountability. Dishonest people would love to do the bad things to make you a scapegoat. Identification. How do you prove something was done by you if others know your password? You can't, right? So if you give your password out, you're going to have issues. And then, of course, access and authorization. Your login and password control what resources can be accessed, and if somebody knows your password, they can access everything that you can. So think about, again, the type of information, how you use your passwords, and sometimes how you reuse those passwords. The composition, there's two different parts to that. The length makes a good password. Longer the password, the harder it is to guess or crack. And there's some caveats to that. Complexity, passwords with mixed case letters, numbers, and special characters are harder to guess. And everybody at this point usually starts to groan or moan, saying, well, if it's long and it's complex, I'm probably not going to remember it. So, of course, we're going to talk about why you shouldn't be writing them down and maybe some ways to actually prevent writing them down and still use longer and complex passwords. Change frequency. Limit how long, this actually limits how long a compromised account is accessible and limits the window of time that a password may be cracked before it becomes unusable. So people enforce these, and they're anywhere from 30 days to 120 days. It all depends on what the actual policy is of a company. Personally, some of your better websites in terms of security do actually force you to change your passwords, but there are some sites that allow you to have the passwords and don't force any changes. Keep this in mind. If you're working for an organization and you change your password every 90 days, take the time, go through your personal accounts, and think about how often you should be changing those as well. I know it's a pain, but at the same time, that frequency is there for a couple different reasons. It's that compromised account, and then also, if it is exposed, how long will it take for it to be cracked, and then, it could be potentially used. Incrementing numbers, just to go onto the actual password composition, is a bad idea. Some secret 1, some secret 2, password 1, password 2. Obviously, you want to stay away from doing that. If it's a cracked password and somebody's able to use it to log into your account, one of the first things that an attacker is going to do is increment those numbers. If they see a 1 or a 2, why not choose the next number, increment it, and see what happens. So how do you come up with a good password? And a lot of people have been talking about using a passphrase for a long period of time. Passphrases add some flexibility, are easier to remember, and are inherently more secure. Obviously, for this, you're just trying to think of a phrase that's easy for you to remember. 3 blind mice, see how they run, and turn it into a passphrase, something that, it's more secure, it helps you remember it, and it's harder to crack. I'm going to get into a couple examples here. For good passwords, kind of going off of what we just talked about with passphrases, The Beatles are my #1 band. Obviously, it's a phrase that you can say, but at the same time, you can turn it into a password. Uppercase, abbreviations with R, using pound for number, 1, and then band. And then going back to the 3 blind mice saying, three mice are blind, see them run. So again, you see some abbreviations and then an exclamation point at the end. So again, these are good examples of passphrases to be used. The bad passwords, we've all seen them time and time again. Any variation of the word password, especially with 1 or 01 or 123 behind it. Any variation of seasons or months and years. So this is an interesting one because we still see this most prevalently around the penetration tests that we do. And it's unfortunate because the complexity, it falls into being somewhat of a complex password because there are uppercase, lowercase letters, and then also numbers involved. But you can see how easy it would be to crack. And obviously, it's something that we can look at depending upon the time of year and make some guesses. So I can tell you from penetration tests that we do, if we were to be doing one right now, we would most likely start with summer 2016 and then go into fall of 2016 to try those first. They're going to change every 3 months. So, a 90-day change, which would go back to some of the best practices that you see in passwords. But at the same time, people are changing them to something that's pretty trivial to guess. And then, of course, any variation of your company name or your name. So putting your number, maybe your name or a company name, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are going to be trivial for somebody to guess. Password sharing, it is good intention, right? It seems like a good idea to share your password with a supervisor or assistant so they can help you out. However, it does defeat the concept of accountability and non-repudiation. So you can do this, and there are good reasons for it, but at the same time, you're actually giving up why passwords are being used or why passwords are implemented at your company or personally. The socially engineered password, somebody asks you to provide your password and you don't know them or not sitting beside them, the answer is almost indefinitely no. Never a good reason to reveal your password to anyone. If it's doing something that requires access to your account, there's always a way around that, right? This does not require you to reveal your password. If it's an administrator in your company, there is a way where they can supersede your level of access as an administrator to carry out the goals or whatever it is to actually troubleshoot the issue that they're having. So the answer should always be no. Password reuse. Again, we talked about personal accounts and then applicability to corporate accounts or your company accounts. And this is where this comes into play. Password reuse means setting the same password on multiple systems or applications. It's bad because, again, looking at some of the leaks and some of the hacking that we've seen in the past couple of years, things like Dropbox, things like Netflix, things like LinkedIn, if those systems are compromised and your password's stolen, how hard is it to actually use those passwords if they are decrypted or even in an encrypted state but can be reversed to apply that to your corporate account? So, a couple of the examples here that I already talked about, LinkedIn and Twitter accounts, they have, multiple usernames where most likely people have access to the full names of the individuals. If they're doing searches for those individuals, they can correlate that to a company that they're working for. And if there's any way for an external login, say a VPN connection or external email, why not use that same password? So anytime you hear of any breach that may affect you, make sure that you're not only changing those passwords. I would recommend you not to reuse passwords across personal and business accounts. And if you do, the likelihood of attack into those other accounts because of one other compromise is very high. Jumping into public or untrusted computers, this is another area where we see a lot of people losing their passwords or have their passwords stolen. A couple things to be cognizant of here. The keystroke loggers. Look at how small that thing is, and it essentially plugs in to a keyboard so that it captures all of the keystrokes. Also, be aware of malicious software that would be installed on one of those shared computers. Most of them are pretty good, but at the same time, make sure that you understand why you're using that computer. I've used public terminals in the past, essentially usually just at hotels to print out my boarding pass. When I do that, I do check the physical connections around the computer, and usually I'm just going directly to the site and actually trying to download the boarding pass based off of the confirmation that I have. So I'm not logging into any specific sites. I'm not exposing any credentials. All right. I'm trying to get back into the, if you guys can still hear me here. I got a little blip on my screen, so I'm reconnecting again. But essentially, you're not using those public terminals to log in or expose your...
We can still hear you fine, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, I'm back in. It was just a slight blip there. So essentially, again, kind of making sure that you're not exposing those credentials or exposing any sensitive information on those public terminals. Okay? The other thing to be cognizant of here, just because they are usually in public spaces, are shoulder surfers. So public computers may put you in a position where somebody can observe what you're doing. I know I always kind of pay attention to who's behind me, but then also where they're located. If you're in an internet cafe, who knows who may be behind you, or are you facing a direction where somebody can see you through a window? Renee, can you go ahead and advance the next one? I see it when I reconnected it kicked me out of presentation mode, or you can just click me back over to it.
Yep, I can click it right there.
Okay. I don't know if you can change my connection back to presenter mode so I can click through, or I'll just tell you to click through them. The other thing about passwords, remembering every password you have is difficult. Everyone realizes that. We talked about length and complexity, especially since we're telling you should be using a unique password for each system. So how are you supposed to remember them all? Well, don't write them down. We still see a lot of folks when we're doing penetration tests or physical assessments or clean desk checks where people write them on sticky notes, put them on their screen, under their keyboard, on a wall, whatever it may be. Don't save them in a file on your desktop. One of the best automated things in some of the software that we use when we're attacking organizations or specifically computers and users' computers is that it will automatically go through and scrape and try to find documents like password.xlsx, Word documents, whatever it may be that may contain all of these passwords. The do's, come up with a scheme that you can easily remember but isn't guessable. And this would be for not only your passwords but permutations of it. I know myself specifically, I have, roughly, I'll say 150 to 200 passwords that I remember. Some of these are pretty benign, and some of them I don't use. Most of them I don't use on a regular basis. So what's the other thing that you can do? Either look towards your company, your organization, or seek out some type of password storage solution that protects your most valued passwords. There are a lot of password lockers out in the market right now. Some of them are really good. It just depends on what you're looking for in terms of a feature set and getting used to storing your credentials in there. With that said, they can also become a target. So making sure that you understand that the password to unlock that locker is very secure, and hopefully it employs two-factor authentication. So it's you're not just giving up something that in terms of a password to unlock it, but then you'd also have the certificate or some other means to be able to unlock it to get to all the rest of your passwords. The definitions, when we start talking about viruses and malicious software, which is that next section. Computer virus, software that's designed to infect a computer and cause it to perform unwanted actions. Malware, short for malicious software, refers to software programs designed to damage or do other unwanted actions on a computer. So a little bit different in terms of what the definitions are. And then of course we have our antivirus and anti-malware, which have kind of been blended together over the past 5 or 6 years, which is the software intended to protect computers from malicious software. Common sources of infection that we've seen, some of the stuff that we've already talked about. Executables from emails or documents that come from emails. So, going back to what we've talked about in the email section, making sure that you trust the source that it's coming from. On the web browsing side, we talked about some of the protections that you can enable and some of the things that you need to be on the lookout for web browsing. But the attacks actually take advantage of vulnerable web browsers or downloading and executing malicious files. Sometimes, and we've all done it at some point or another, you need access to a certain piece of software or there's an add-on that you want to try out. Make sure that when you're doing that, you're actually going to sites that are reputable and you're not downloading malicious files that aren't actually linked to the type of software that you're trying to use. And then, of course, be cognizant of visiting malicious sites. Take advantage of other weaknesses, administrative access in Windows, or doing things that you don't want to do. Most of the browsers now have pop-ups, and there are security protections that give you at least a warning when these things are going to happen. Other sources of infection: removable media with malicious files, USB flash drives, CDs and DVDs, and drive enclosures. People, I think, are a little bit more wary about this stuff now. It used to be that you could walk through an organization, and if a flash drive was laying around, in most cases, one of the first things that people would do would plug it in and see what was on it. We broke into a lot of organizations with not only flash drives, but CDs. You used to be able to put a CD out in a shared area and write MP3 on it, and everybody thought that they were getting a ton new MP3s for free. Meanwhile, it would auto-launch, and with that auto-launch, malicious software would install on the computer. We used it from a penetration testing perspective to not only drive home the advantages of doing security awareness, but also as a means to gain access to organizations, so that we have specifically created and specifically crafted malware that would install and then actually contact us so that we would have a foothold in the environment. But who's to say that the bad guys can't be doing this stuff too? And then, of course, different software vulnerabilities. Things that are missing patches or outdated software might have weak passwords. It's another source of the infection. This is actually most commonly how things continue to move throughout the environment. So a virus or a piece of malware may permutate, mutate a little bit, and then continue to move through the environment just by taking advantage of different software vulnerabilities. The protections, the first line of defense, it's always the people. Don't download software from untrusted sources. Don't open those executable attachments. Don't access media from untrusted sources. That wipes out most of what we just talked about in that last slide in terms of how infections usually occur. The second line of defense, the antivirus, anti-malware, it's the detect and block, and these are kind of commodity solutions anymore. Maintain up-to-date software and signatures. Keep it running at all times and perform full scans at least weekly. And this is not only for corporate environments, but at home as well. We all know that we work more from home than we ever have. A lot of us take our work laptops home, and then they're plugged into our home environment or other environments where people may have access. So it's important that you're not only looking at this stuff from a corporate standpoint, but then also from a personal standpoint, just to make sure that there are no cross-infections. Patches and updates, it kind of goes back to that old saying, the ounce of prevention. Let Windows updates run automatically. Don't forget to update the other software. And again, we're talking more about the personal side of things here. In most cases in corporate environments, Windows updates may be pushed out from a centralized server, or we've seen a lot of institutions in the past few years actually go back to what they're doing on the desktop side and allow some level of Windows updates to be done automatically, so they don't have to worry about going through and approving all of them and pushing them out via method. The other software are the things that I think scare most IT administrators more. These are harder to track and harder to keep up to date. Some of them have built-in update capabilities that have been pretty good. Other pieces of software are pretty hard to wrangle down. But it's important just to make sure that they are up to date as new software patches come out to defeat the vulnerabilities that have been found. Resolving an infection is the next step. If you do click on something, or if it does find a way into your system via a vulnerability, disconnect from the network, power it off if files are being damaged, and for company-owned computers, contact IT immediately. For personally owned computers, consult with a professional. In most cases, you're going to be able to fight this thing on your own, but don't feel any shame in actually reaching out to somebody that you know as a security service provider, either within your company, or if you're going to ask for assistance outside, utilizing somebody trustworthy to make sure that the information is protected, but then also that the infection is taken off of the computer. Some of the malware can only be resolved with a complete rebuild of the computer. So it's very important to make sure that you keep backups, whether that's through some vendor-supplied backup solution for your work computer or your personal computer. That stuff's turned on and adequately configured. But then realizing that sometimes some of this malware has so many hooks and does so much damage to a computer that the only way that you can actually get back to a working state that you can trust is to completely do a fresh rebuild. And then the last topic, or the second to last topic that we're going to talk about, is social engineering. So it's something that everyone's seen or everybody's heard of at some point. And basically is the manipulating of the inherent trust of another person to convince them to perform some action or divulge information. The types that we're just going to touch on here: phishing, which I've mentioned a few times, which is the email-based deception; vishing, which is just voice phishing, obviously based on phone; piggybacking, physically following somebody into an unauthorized space, either a secured facility or a secured area; pretexting. This is an interesting one, using an elaborate scenario to dupe a victim into believing the legitimacy of a social engineer; baiting. This is kind of like the real-world Trojan horse. So this is the USB stick containing malware and left in a public area, which again we've talked about. Quid pro quo, literally something for something. Providing information for a gift or prize. People are always motivated to get a $50 gift card from Amazon, right? So making sure that you're a little bit wary of those. And then also the shoulder surfing. So observing or exposing sensitive information while somebody's actively viewing it. Recognizing it. Again, this is part of why we're doing this awareness training, and it's something that should be done in every organization. Asking for sensitive information or protected information. Passwords, personal information, whatever it may be. This is not something that's regular. It's not okay. It's never going to be okay, right? If you have a legitimate reason for asking for this type of information, then you have a much larger security problem in your organization. There's never a reason, or there's never a task that can't be done without this type of information. Unknown persons or persons without proper credentials following you into a secured area. This is one of the hardest lessons to try to teach folks when we're doing penetration tests or afterwards. It's okay to turn around and confront somebody. You can do it without being nasty or doing it in a way that causes some sort of scene or a fight. Simply asking them, to see their credentials, or asking them which department they work for or who their point of contact is the easiest way to do this. Do not leave open-ended questions or questions that can allow them to walk away from you or simply bypass your line of questions. If you ask somebody, if you see them, they're in your organization, you don't recognize them, and you turn to them and say, "Are you supposed to be here?" Me as an attacker would say, "Absolutely, I'm supposed to be here," and I would keep walking right along. So not trying to verify my identity or stop me and try to gain more information about me is not the way to do this. If something just doesn't feel quite right, this is when you need to speak up. So you go back to a lot of the Department of Homeland Security and A lot of the different transportation agencies that keep saying, if you see something, say something. And this goes right along with that. If it doesn't seem right, it probably isn't right. Defending against it, phishing, identifying the source of all requests to make sure they're legitimate, never giving out sensitive or personal information to someone asking for it, and making sure that folks understand that this is not the type of information that they'd be asked for, and not clicking on links in email messages, using your bookmarks or links from trusted sources or sites only. In a lot of the phishing scenarios that we do, we're not only asking people to click on links, but then asking them to input information. If it's a common practice within your organization to send out emails that ask people to click on links that may be hidden or input information, then you're actually continuing to promote that problem. You should make sure that when you send out communications, continually just pushing people towards an intranet site or asking them to call the help desk. Phishing defenses, we talk about voice, identifying the source of all requests to make sure they're legitimate. Again, never giving out that information, and if need be, calling back to trusted numbers. I do this almost with every personal vendor that I have, and a lot of professional vendors as well. Somebody calls me, oftentimes they may be using a call farm or maybe outsourced as a first level to talk about an account or whatever it may be. I ask those folks if I can call them back. They should be able to give you a correct number and should give you the information to be able to call them back. If they don't, be wary of the types of information that they were asking about and where that call came from. I never, almost never, answer a phone that's from an unknown number or answer a call from an unknown number. If it is and it's somebody legitimate, I usually ask them why it's coming from an unknown number, and if I can, give them a call back. Then, of course, on the physical side, piggybacking. Be on the lookout for loiterers and make sure that the actual door closes behind you. We did some demonstrations again yesterday with the TV station that was doing a story on us where we kind of walked through how we break into physical locations for clients. And we talked about how loitering, simple things like smokers' lounges or smokers' areas outside, are known to be a great spot to hang out and just wait for people to file back in after a small break. And then also just making sure that door closes behind you. If it doesn't latch appropriately or is a little bit slow, great opportunity for somebody to stick their hand in there and walk right in. Some more of this with the pretexting, elaborate and fantastic stories. Again, if it's too good to be true, then it most likely is, right? So don't fall for stories that seem out of context, seem very much made up. Stick to reality. Otherwise, if it is elaborate and fantastic, it's probably a social engineering attack. The baiting, USBs, CDs, DVDs, whatever it may be, do not, under any circumstances, take something from an untrusted source, either if you found it or somebody's given it to you, and stick it in your computer. People have gotten out of the habit of taking these to conferences or handing them out at conferences because people were wary of them. If you find them, give it to IT or give it to physical security. If somebody's lost it, they'll claim it. Quid pro quo. Nothing comes without a cost. Again, just be cautious of that. Don't unwittingly follow instructions from somebody you haven't identified as trustworthy. And again, we all fall into this. If you want a $50 Amazon gift card, you may be able to answer a survey, or you may be willing to answer that survey for that $50, but it does come at a cost. And then, of course, keep aware of the shoulder surfing. When you're in a public area, or even when you're in a personal area, on your on your home network or at home, or even within another organization, make sure that you understand what your surroundings are. Keep your sensitive information locked in safe places, and of course out of plain sight. There's a lot of folks that at home may work in a shared space, maybe at the dining room table, leaving that computer up and running and then running out to get something to eat real quick. If somebody can see in your window, they're going to see everything that's on your desktop if it's not locked, or they could see the computer itself. and see that it's unattended and a good opportunity to steal it. For responding to it within an organization, within a company, make sure that you're actually bringing this to somebody's attention. If you've fallen for it, so it's very important. Don't be embarrassed. If you've clicked on a link or downloaded something or provided information, it's easier to address if we know what happened. Do not try to hide it. It's only going to continue to be worse. We've seen multiple cases like this, even in some of the popularized breaches. It's better if you report it and then work from that instance out. And then just the last topic, I'll get through this. There's not going to be really any chance for Q&A, but since this was more about social engineering, or not social engineering, security awareness, didn't really allow too much time for that. The last section is really just about Wi-Fi connectivity. We all love it. Gives us the ability to move between rooms easily, avoid running wires, and access to the internet from just about anywhere. I think everyone's kind of deployed this in their not only their corporate environment, but obviously in their personal environment as well. There are risks that come with that. All that information's floating around where anybody can listen in unless it's protected, and you may be tricked into connecting to malicious networks. When we get into the definitions, it's funny, I'll give you a personal story. Actually just happened this morning. For myself, I always sit down, I always connect to the same wireless networks, corporate networks, and even personal networks. But I always look at it to make sure that I'm on the right ones. For whatever reason this morning, my computer, instead of connecting to the correct network, actually connected to one of the publicly available Xfinity networks. The reasoning, not really sure, but before I started anything up, I made sure I went through and actually switched it, number one, but then again went back through and made sure that I never connected to one of those public Xfinity hotspots. The definitions, this is a little bit of an eye chart, just gives you some ideas of what we're talking about. The SSID, essentially the network name. Wi-Fi protected access to, this is the preferred security protocol for wireless network communications. When we talk about rogue access points, this is unauthorized wireless routers connected to secured wireless networks that may be in a company or even in your personal environment. Broadcast range, how far can that signal go? VPNs, fully encrypted connection for all traffic to and from company networks. And then, of course, something that we've already touched on, the hypertext transfer protocol, which is secure. So this is that HTTPS communications protocol for secure communications over a network, more specifically when web browsing. Protecting your own Wi-Fi network, some simple tips. Change the default password. Use WPA2 to encrypt your communications. Makes it unreadable to somebody that intercepts it. Again, always pick a strong password and unique passphrases for your Wi-Fi network and the admin account. Patch your router, right? Make sure, as a critical part of your own personal network, those wireless routers are up to date and the vulnerabilities are taken care of. Disable the SSID broadcasting. Don't let other people know what your network name is. This is relatively easy to do, all of these tips. And configure an SSID that's non-identifying. So don't set something up like Schleck Network, Schleck Home Network, right? I know somebody that's driving by that knows that I live in this area could look at it and say, wow, Ron Schleck, his home network is right there. Maybe if he's working from home today, I could steal some great client information. Of course, don't share your Wi-Fi passphrase with anyone that doesn't live in your home. So I have 3 teenage daughters. Every one of their friends has some sort of smart device. And without fail, every time they come over here, they ask for the Wi-Fi passphrase. This is something that I had to actually sit down and talk to all 3 of them about. Don't give out, the Wi-Fi passphrase that we use. My way of dealing with it was that I not only gave my kids a different passphrase on a separate network, but then also a guest network that we can give out to friends that come by that's controlled and only allowed to be used during certain times. Of course, I'm a little bit more paranoid than everyone else. Then, of course, protecting yourself. Don't connect to open access points unless you know where they're from. They're not always secure, right? So you may think that it's okay to be connecting to the hotel Wi-Fi, and you may have to, but at the same time, be cognizant of the fact that that information and that traffic could be sniffed. Most sensitive company information should never be connected to open Wi-Fi networks without using some type of VPN connection. So if you have that option at your company or personally, make sure you're using it. Don't let your devices connect automatically to open wireless networks. I gave you the example of Xfinity. Xfinity wants to be able to cover, at least in the Philadelphia area, pretty much everywhere with their public Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, this is something that if you connect to once, your device is going to continually seek that out as a preferred wireless network. Pay careful attention to the security certificate warnings of your browser. If they're indicating that you might be under attack or they don't match up with the actual wireless network that you're using, be a little bit wary of it. If you get prompted for a password you didn't expect to be prompted, say all of a sudden you connect to this network and you get 2 pop-ups asking you for your password for your email, think about it. Make sure that you're actually on a good network that's trusted. And pay attention to the Wi-Fi networks with changing names or SSIDs. They could be rogue access points. Even if they're slightly different, we've seen this in companies. Common types, I'm just kind of going to gloss over this. This really just goes back to the point that WPA2 is the most secure. It is trivial to set this up on your home routers. In any corporate environment, this should be the standard, but just make sure that you're pushing this, and if you're setting up your own personal router, you're actually using WPA2 as opposed to WEP or WPA. And that's essentially it. It was a rough and tumble security awareness training session. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope everyone got some information about it. There really isn't time for any Q&A. If you do have something that you'd like to have answered, feel free to send off an email to info@btbsecurity.com or reach out to us directly. We do have the capability on our website now to schedule meetings directly with any of our sales staff as well as individuals that are in that sales or marketing function. So if you do have specific questions, I encourage you to do so. Otherwise, I just want to thank everyone for their time and wrap up the presentation. This will be recorded, or this was recorded. This will be available not only on our website but also on our YouTube channel within the coming days. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. That's the end of our webinar for today. We'll see you for the next one. Thank you.